on a big emotional win. And the other was the first time that they really had their discipline tested by an option team, and it was kind of the perfect storm. We had both those going on simultaneously, and we really didn't pass either test. I mean, I get the feeling that whether they were just kind of emotionally drained by such a big win over Montana the week before, whether that kind of took some of their focus off getting ready for the next week, or what it was. They came out flat. They were not ready for the speed that the Citadel was going to run that offense, and they were on their heels from the first possession, and the only time the defense really ever got any stops was late in the third quarter through the fourth quarter when the Citadel starters were no longer in the game. So, and conversely, really the only time we got much offense going was when we still had our starters in on offense and they had their backups in on defense. So, and I will say that I was very impressed with the performance of the Citadel. And given how long it had been since they had gotten a win in Boone, you could definitely see that there might be some temptation to really see how badly they could beat us and try to run the score up on us. And I do think it was a classy move to do what they did, because even though 52-28 is a lopsided victory, had they wanted to really keep their foot on the gas and take it to us, it could have looked a lot worse than it was. They did what they had to do to kind of stomp on our throats early in the third quarter, and they called off the dogs, and we got some points and some yards in garbage time, but it was a tough game to watch, and from a fan's perspective, it was disappointing, really, even before the game got started. We had 30,000 people at the Montana game, and there were a lot of empty seats there were a lot of empty seats last weekend. Went from 30,000 to 24,000. Whether that's a byproduct of the fans thinking that the Citadel was going to be an easy win, or it's really hard to explain. It was a beautiful day outside, and we were coming off of a big win, but attendance dropped 20% from the first home game to the second, and the crowd really never seemed to get loud. Obviously, a lot of that was due to the Citadel and how much they took it to us early, but it was a disappointing turnout from a crowd standpoint. The crowd came out flat, the team came out flat, and it was seemed like this one was over before it even started.
Yeah, definitely, and with the fan base, I really don't know how to put my finger on it, because, like you said, the weather was perfect. That's about as perfect as I can remember tailgate weather being in Boone. It wasn't windy, it wasn't cold, it wasn't rainy, it wasn't snowing. It was just sunshine in the 70s and absolute perfect. So I don't think the weather was the issue. I think exactly what you said is they just thought, Citadel, we beat them every year. Why am I going to waste time going up the mountain? And unfortunately, I think that's kind of how our team was taking it as well. At least it looked like it. They just came out really flat without the energy that they needed, and Citadel just gave it to us. There was no other way to put it. They just whooped us.
Yeah. And one thing, I'm only going to touch on it briefly. I don't want to, make this a focal point of the show or talk about it too much. But, a lot has been made about the suspensions of Jamil Lawton and of Sean Price, and how that was handled, and that the rule reads that it's, the players are suspended for 2 out of the first 4 games. And, I don't think that, Coach Moore bent any rules or broke any rules by doing what he did. I'm not a fan of the rule itself. I think that any rule like that lends itself to subjectivity is going to send a lot of wrong messages from a player discipline standpoint, and that, basically the coaches have the leeway to, let you play for what they perceive to be the bigger games. And also from a preparation standpoint, obviously none of our coaches would ever come out and say that we don't think the Citadel is that good, and we don't think we need to prepare for them as much. But you don't really need to say it when you're able to pick what 2 games that the players are going to be suspended for, and you decide to hold them out against an FBS game that doesn't count towards our FCS season, and against the Citadel. It really, without having to say anything, it really shows, who the coaches are most concerned about, and who they think is, who they think poses the biggest threat. And obviously the Citadel wasn't that, and they proved us wrong. And, I just think that, I really hope that's a rule that is revisited and changed, because I think a 2 game suspension should be a 2 game suspension. And had we not had that choice to make, who knows if it would have changed preparation anymore. But I do think that being able to sit the players out when you want, and choosing the Citadel as a game to sit them against does, whether it's on purpose or whether it's inadvertent, it does send a message to the team that we don't need to worry about this team that much, and they sure didn't look like they worried about it much.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that 100%. I mean, you got to have a rule that's a rule. They're just that's kind of bending the rule. I know exactly like you said. The rule says 2 of the first 4 games, but that can't be done. It's to me that's saying exactly what you said, where it's going to make the team just possibly look down on the team that they are being suspended for. One, but two, it's not sending the right message for the suspension, in my opinion. It's kind of saying, well, you're really good, and we need you against Montana. But even though you messed up, we don't really need you against Citadel. That to me is sending the wrong message of, well, if I'm good enough, coach is going to let me play the important games, and that's not right. But like you said, let's not harp on that too much for the show. And obviously it wasn't too easy to see any positives in the Citadel game. But what good signs did you see on Saturday?
Well, we touched on it briefly earlier, and one thing that I thought was a positive, and it was a positive from the first time that Appalachia touched the ball, was Tony Washington in the return game. He started the game off with a big kick return, which unfortunately we weren't able to convert into points. But he looked great returning kicks. He had 6 kickoff returns, 176 yards, which just shy of 30-yard average. And then, as I mentioned, that long of 51. And he is a guy that's very dangerous in the open field. I thought he looked really strong in the in the return game. That was that was one small kind of silver lining to take from it. And then in terms of staying on the special team side of things, Sam Martin again had another great game, and it's not a great game when you're talking about your punter as the player of the game, but he had he averaged 49 and a half yards a punt and had a long of 68. As we talked about earlier, there was that one that was blocked, although that's protection. You can't really put that one on Sam, and it's pretty incredible to have a 49 and a half yard average when one of them went for 8 yards because it got blocked. So. He had a great game, and offensively, defensively, there were 2 players really that stood out to me that really looked like they came to play. Defensively, no surprise, Jeremy Kimbrough. He had 15 tackles, a tackle for loss. Even later in the game, when the outcome had long since been decided, he was out there playing hard. He was all over the field. He put forth a great effort. And offensively, this is one area that I think is more than just a small bright spot. Stephen Miller had a great game. He carried the ball 21 times, put up a career high 167 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaged 8 yards per carry. He really had a great game. And again, as we said earlier, a lot of that did come after we were already down by a large margin. But he played hard until the very end, and it's encouraging with Rod Chisholm kind of still nursing himself back to health. It's encouraging to see that he was able to handle 20 plus carries for consecutive games and be productive. He's already got almost as many rushing yards as he had all of last season. So he was definitely probably the lone bright spot of the offense, and I thought he looked really good. He ran well, and that's something that going forward we're going to need. We're going to need that strong ground game, especially this weekend against Chattanooga. So I thought that was definitely a bright spot.
Yeah, I agree. Kimbrough and Miller both showed tremendous heart. Like you said, we were down by way too much, and they both continued to play their hearts out and try to bring the team back. Whether they knew that we could come back or not, they were trying to. They were playing as hard as they possibly could to make a comeback. And those stats, they tell a story on their own. And Sam Martin, after he kicked his long of 68, some of the people sitting around me were like, yeah, we're going to see him playing on Sundays. And honestly, I think he's got great potential to be playing on Sundays if he gets his consistency down. A long of 68, and that was a long of 68, but it probably traveled at least 50 in the air, if not more. I mean, it was a great kick. So Sam Martin was, like you said, unfortunately, he was probably our player of the game, but it was. It's great to see him still doing well, and you hit on it a few podcasts ago, saying that it's done tremendous in letting him just focus on punting as opposed to punting and place kicking and kickoffs. He's just doing punting and kickoffs now, which I think has helped him tremendously. And Tony Washington, when he had that long return to 51 to start our first possession of the game, I thought, all right, well, here we go. It's going to be easy route. Well, obviously I was proved wrong, but Tony Washington, I do like what he's doing on the returning end, and I really think he's being benefited by having Takoy Sumler on the other side. They don't want to kick to Sumler as much, so Washington's getting it, and he's proven them, well, you guys really can't kick to either one of us. We're both fast and speedy and quick and can get around you and get good return yards. So that's good to see. And I'm excited for the rest of the season. I really am. I know we had a disappointing turnout last weekend, but I'm really excited for the rest of the season. Again, this week against Chattanooga, it's probably it's a must-win game for the SoCon. Now that Citadel is 2-0 in the SoCon, beating the preseason top two teams, it's a must-win for us. And against Chattanooga, against a team that has played us very tough in recent years. Back in 2010, we had to make a huge comeback in order to grab a win against them in their house, and we won by 1 point because they went for a 2-point conversion in the last second, and we stopped it. So we ended up winning 42-41. If you remember, that was, I believe we were down 21-0 at one point, and DeAndre Presley, that was really his coming out party. He came out and willed us back. And then last year, it was the exact opposite in terms of points scored. In Boone, we didn't score one offensive touchdown last year, and we barely beat them 14-12 in what's obviously was a defensive battle. So, Mike, what do you think we have to do to bounce back from the defeat against the Citadel and beat the Monks in Finley Stadium on Saturday evening?
Well, I think there are several things that have to happen. Some of it is kind of X's and O's, and some of it is mental. I mean, this is it is. You know, we've got some experience sprinkled in there, but overall we've got a pretty young team, especially in the secondary, on the defensive line, and in the wide receivers and offensive line on offense. So there's a lot of inexperience on that team, and it's a lot of it is going to be mental and how they react to such an embarrassing loss at home last week. And I think that really there's two ways that it can go. One is that they can let that loss kill their confidence and come out and not be aggressive and and let that carry over to next week. And if that happens, to be quite honest, I think it's going to be another ugly game for us if they let last week stay in their heads. But what I'm hoping for, and to be quite honest, what I expect is the opposite. I'm expecting them to come out with a chip on their shoulder and be angry and be hungry and learn a lesson from last week and know that it doesn't matter who you're playing. You have to treat every game like it's a big game and like it's your last game. And I think they will come out with something to prove because, to be quite honest, they have a lot to prove after what happened last week. And from a personnel standpoint, from X's and O's, defensively, they're going to have to contain Jacob Huseman. He is the son of Coach Russ Huseman, and he's the type of quarterback that we've had some troubles with. From a defensive standpoint, because he is a dual threat quarterback. He actually leads the team in rushing. He has 213 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. Passing, he's completing about 2/3 of his passes, has 417 passing yards and 4 touchdowns against only 1 pick. So statistically, he's been strong rushing, he's been strong throwing, and those dual threat quarterbacks are the ones that we've struggled with the most, historically, and that's that's where it all starts defensively. We've got to keep him in the pocket. We can't let him scramble and do what Ben Dupree did last week and break our backs on 3rd downs and have situations where we have good coverage down the field and then he just makes a play with his legs and scrambles for that 1st down. We've really got to contain him. And offensively, we have to limit turnovers. We didn't have a lot of turnovers last week.